What's going on YouTube? This is Rybo back at the bench, and today I've got another cut or carry watch video, somewhat of a rarity these days. And today I'm looking at this 36 millimeter Omega Seamaster. So a couple things. So first of all, if you've watched the channel for any amount of time, you know this channel is not typically going to be reviewing new gear, new knives, watches, etc. Particularly with watches, I tend to gravitate towards older stuff. It's just what I'm interested in, and so a lot of the watch reviews are watches that have been out for quite a while. The last couple, have kind of more of a vintage theme as well. This one's not quite vintage. I think this one that you're looking at is dated to around 2006. So not quite vintage, but it's a vintage size, and it's definitely not a new watch. So this is the Seamaster 2551.80, and this is, like I said, the 36 millimeter. So I'm going to share my opinions on this guy after wearing it for a little while. But before I do that, let me get into a size comparison. So two watches that I brought out for a size comparison. Actually, one of them is on the wrist, so let me pop it off really quick. And if you watch the channel, you know this is what I'm bringing out, but this is the SKX 007. I thought it was a good comparison just because you probably have one of these. You probably at least know the size. This is a 42.5 millimeter, again, 36 millimeter. So you can see more of a modern size, although a lot of modern divers are even bigger. I think this is a fairly modest size. You can also see I have still not gotten that scratch repaired, or crystal replaced, because it's got some sentimental value. That was my Appalachian Trail hike years ago that I picked that up, and so every time I wear this, that's what I think about. Anyway, 42.5 millimeters, 36 millimeters, so you can see pretty big size disparity there. Same with the thickness. The Seamaster, I think, is incredibly thin for the style watch that it is. One of the things that I really like about it. And then because it's a 36 millimeter, I had to bring out my baby, the Datejust 1601, which is also a 36 millimeter. Now, the Datejust on the right here is much older. This is, I can't remember. I have a horrible memory. I think 70s Datejust, and again, mid 2000s, but both the same size. Interestingly, the Datejust over here, which is older, has a 20 millimeter lug width. This one, which is newer, has an 18 millimeter lug width. Kind of interesting because a lot of times on the vintage watches, you would see smaller lug widths like 18, 16, and on the newer watches, 20, 22. This is kind of inverse, which I think is interesting. I do think maybe that's due to this having the helium escape valve over here, which may have made the lugs look a bit awkward if they were a bit wider, but that is one interesting thing to note. But besides that, they're actually somewhat similar cases. Obviously, the Seamaster has the bezel, and that gives it a little bit of a bigger appearance, although the Rolex over here has a larger dial that's visible with the fluted bezel, so I think it wears a bit bigger than 36. So both of these are a pretty small size, but I think wear a little bit larger on the wrist. However, you can see for a dive watch to a dress watch, these are actually not that dissimilar in terms of overall kind of case profile and size on the wrist. Thickness is really not all that off, especially when you consider the higher crystal on the Datejust there. It kind of makes up for the bezel on the Seamaster. So anyway, I thought those were a pretty cool pairing to show side by side. All right, so let me just share some thoughts, things that I like about, like and dislike about the 36 millimeter Seamaster. So first of all, the reason I picked up this watch for review is that I had read or heard from our customers at Uncle Straps that you could put our speedy reduced bracelets on these vintage, and I call them vintage, but it's, they're anywhere from, actually, I don't know how far back they go. I think this particular model goes back to the 90s. But we had heard that you could put these speedy reduced bracelets that have hollow or standard end links on these 36 millimeter Seamasters without issue. And so I thought that was really cool, and I wanted to try it out. It was very, very easy. I didn't even have to bend the tabs to get it to fit. It just popped right on, and I think it looks really, really good. This watch does come with this stock bracelet, which everyone really loves. I think mostly due to this double button clasp, milled clasp, and it is a very nice clasp. The action on it, not action, but the closing and opening is really nice, has a nice snappy sound to it. It's a great clasp. I don't like the way it looks, and I don't like the way the bracelet looks. I think it looks very, 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 very dated. And I think the clasp is just a bit longer than I prefer, or at least it looks that way because you don't have much breaking it up. So I'm not a huge fan of the clasp, although I think it's a very nice one. So I was excited to be able to put it on a little bit more of a modern, I mean, it's still a vintagey vibe, but a newer bracelet. I prefer the pressure clasp when I'm wearing watches like this because it's a little bit more rattly. It feels, I don't know, it just suits the watch a little bit more to me, even though it is a dive watch. So things that I like about this watch, so number one, and the thing that drew me to it, besides that, is the size. And I'm gonna just show this on wrist really quick. But this is the size. This to me is absolutely perfect for a watch. If all my watches were this size, I would be happy, man. It centers nicely. It's not too big. It's not too small. It's very thin on the wrist as well, especially for a diver, and it's got the 3 o'clock crown here, which, you know, some people don't like because it digs into your wrist, but at the 36 millimeter size, it's really not an issue at all. And I really, really like that. So the size, I think, is perfect. It's very uncommon for a diver like this, but I think it works really, really well. Overall, the case, I think, is done really, really well. Like I said, the 3 o'clock crown, which not everyone loves, especially more recently. You have a lot of 4 o'clock crowns, which I do like a lot, but I think one of the things that makes this one particularly nice is that you have these crown guards that are coming out on the case. And it just it works. Visually it works, and I think it just works on wrist really well. Those actually kind of also accent the scallops on the edges of the bezel over here as well. So case shape, size, kind of the wearability is really good. I really am a fan of the Seamaster case back as well. I think the Speedmaster line, they get carried away with the case back sometimes, but to me, that Seamaster one right there, like you would kind of guess this is from the 60s or 70s, but it's from the mid 2000s. So it's just very classic. I think it looks really, really good. You've got that wave matching the wave on the dial here, which is pretty cool. So I really like that. Other things I like, the red tip on the second hand right here, I think is a really nice touch. The fact that there's no red anywhere else on the bezel or the dial, I think it's really, really subtle. I like how it's broken up by that lume pip on the second hand there. And I really like how there is lume on all three hands. So you have a pip dot on the hour hand over here. You have a triangle on the minute hand at the tip, which, you can't see this now, but when they are aligned, you can still see both of them. And then you have lume on the second hand there as well, which is not as common. And so really, really neat that you've got some nice kind of distinguishing lume markers on all of those things. The lume on this one is really good. Obviously, you would expect it to be. It's not a tritium dial. It's more of a modern, so it's pretty bright lume, but doesn't look out of place at all. I think it looks really, really nice. So that's definitely good. So overall, I think the dial is super legible. It's got that very distinctive Seamaster look and feel to it. It feels like a Bond watch. I think one of the things, if I think about 007, like, the idea is that you can kind of do anything with the watch. You can have, some more action to your day, but also dress up. And that's what I found with this watch. You can really, especially on a bracelet. I mean, this would look really fantastic on a strap as well, on a leather strap. But on a bracelet, you can do anything with this. It's very sporty, wear it with a t-shirt, or you can dress it up very, very easily. I think it balances that really, really well, whereas a lot of other divers don't. And I think for me in particular, that's due to the small size. So I'm a big fan of that. Lastly, I just absolutely love the blue color of that bezel. I think it's really, really attractive. It reminds me of the newer Seiko Patty Monsters. I think I reviewed one of those a few years ago. It's got that same Blue, not in your face, a little bit more understated, more muted, but I think just a really, really nice color. And it's not too much. It's, you can see on this one, it's picked up some wear, but I think it looks really, really nice. So those are the things that I like about this 36 millimeter Seamaster. And now just a few little things that I don't like. Really only two things, actually. So first of all, while the wave is very distinctive for the Seamaster, I am not a huge fan, at least of this one. It's a little bit too shiny for me. I prefer more of a matte look to this one, and it's tough in here because you can see the LEDs in my shop. But this one, it really picks up, which is really cool because if like you're looking at it from down here, you can't really see it until the light hits it and then bam. So it is a cool feature for sure because it adds some depth to the dial. But for me, it's a little bit, it's just a little bit too shiny. It flashes just a little bit too much, and I would prefer something that's maybe like more of a debossed matte look. But that's just personal preference. The other thing that is somewhat personal preference, I guess visually, but is also a functional issue with the watch, and I don't think it's just mine, although this is the only one that I've ever touched, is the bezel. So the bezel is very distinctive. It has these deep scallops all the way around it, and I think it gives a little bit of a dated look to the watch, which is why it looks older than 2006. This just looks like, more of a 70s, 80s style, in my opinion. My wife, not a fan of it, by the way. But I think looking at it, you would say, okay, well, that would add some utility because you can grab these and you can turn the bezel. That has not been the case. So like if I grab my SKX, I can pretty easily turn the bezel. And when I grab this, I cannot at all. Now I can do kind of the palm thing and pretty easily turn the bezel like that. But I am not able to really manipulate this bezel without doing that. There's something about the fact that it's like super thin, and these aren't really like ridges. They're like scallops, so they're pretty smooth. I don't have enough bite on there. Like when I grab this, I'm actually touching more of the case lugs here than the bezel. And so I'm just not able to functionally use the bezel. Like if I'm doing this, and you can hear that, it's actually a great bezel action. Listen to this. Fantastic bezel action, but if I'm doing that, I can't really be super accurate about where I'm setting it. So I don't know if that's just mine. I don't think it is. Like it doesn't, again, the bezel action feels really good. It seems like more of an issue with the thinness of that bezel and the case and kind of how those two play. However, if you have one of these, I would be very interested if you left a comment below to let me know if yours is the same or not, because I'd be super interested to know if that's just me or if that's an issue with these Seamasters. Other than that, though, I really like this watch. So this would be a carry for me, for sure. I would wear this all the time. I think I'll probably sell this. It was really picked up just for review and because I was interested about how the Speedmaster reduced bracelets did. What do you think? Do you like the way that the reduced bracelets fit this? I think they fit pretty well. Sometimes fitting bracelets to watches they're not intended for, well, most times that doesn't work. And sometimes the issue is that the bracelet, comes up too high or too low on the case. But I think it looks pretty good for this watch. So I'm a big fan of it. I think it looks really good. Yeah, definitely a carry for me. Honestly, like you pair these two together and what can you not do with these two watches? Like that's a pair, right? I'm a big fan, glad I got to pick it up and would be interested to hear your opinion. Anyway, until next time, I'll see you later.